Well, hello, and welcome to the 100th episode of Wellness by Design. I'm Jane Hogan, your host, and I can hardly believe we're here at the 100th episode. It seems like I just started this podcast. I had to look back. I started it in July of 2021, and it has been absolutely my pleasure and my passion to share this with you, to share with you the people, the resources, the knowledge, so that you can take these things and, first of all, have hope that you can put chronic pain behind you. But you're also given the tools to actually be able to do that. So I've gone over the 100 episodes. It's really hard, but I limited myself to pick out just 10 of the guests and do a 3 to 5 minute excerpt of gold nuggets that were in those interviews. So I hope you enjoy this. I've really enjoyed putting it together for you. And please help me make this podcast even bigger and better. Help it reach the people it needs to reach by leaving a review and a comment and give it a rating, and please subscribe. It really helps it come up in the rankings so that the people who need to find it can find it. And I thank you so much if you've already done that. And thank you for tuning in every week and listening. It's absolutely my gift and honor to be able to do this. So thank you. I'm now going to move on to the episodes. The first speaker I'm bringing you is a little clip from Dr. Bruce Lipton. He is the author of The Biology of Belief and often called the father of epigenetics. And his book was a game changer for me. In this little excerpt, he's talking about the power of the subconscious mind and how that affects what's going on in your body. What would you say is the root cause of chronic pain? Or can you even answer that in one sentence? But let's begin there.
Well, I'd really go back and recognize something is going on here, and that pain is an indicator. Let's make a relationship to a vehicle, and there's a dashboard, and all the lights are on the dashboard, and all the gauges are on the dashboard, and they give you feedback about the performance of the vehicle. That's what the dashboard's all about. There's the service engine light one, there's one of those service engine light comes on, flashes on, it's like and basically says you have to do something is going on, and you're being called to do something. Pain is not to punish you. Pain is a gauge on the dashboard. And the issue about that is you can say, well, I have chronic pain, so my dashboard is broken. The light on the dashboard has got a problem, and let's fix the circuit of the light on the dashboard. And I go, that's possible that the pain could be due to something wrong in the mechanism. I have to give a very important fact. Less than 1%, less than 1% of disease is connected to genetics. And I say, why is that relevant? I go, well, if I have a defect in my pain system, that would be a genetic issue that the program is wrong. So I'm going to go right now and just say, chronic pain can be due to a breakdown in the system. And yet then I'm going to say less than 1% of the people can actually claim that's where the pain, the pain is coming from.
Right.
It's better to recognize this, that the sensations that we have in our body are feedback. That's everything is feedback. Am I doing it right, wrong? Am I in the right place? All this kind of stuff. When the light comes on for that engine, it's saying there's something wrong. I need your attention. Pain is to say, I need your attention. And at some point it's like, okay, I got chronic pain. You can't, don't keep telling me. Well, the reason why they keep telling you is at some point you may not be dealing with what the cause of the pain is. And this is the issue, is that, well, I don't want to have the pain. So I say, what are you going to do? I'm going to take a pain drug, a medicine or something. I'm going to do something to stop the light, like the equivalent of the service engine light on your car going on. And then you bring it to the dealer and they just take the light bulb out and say, okay, forget about it. You see, there's no light anymore. You feel really okay about the car. I go, you take a step that removes the pain physically by interfering with the mechanism, and then you walk away going, "Nope, I don't feel the pain. Everything's really good." And I go, same problem with the car. If you don't deal with it, it's going to come back, and it's going to come back at a much more powerful message. At first it tries to give you a light message. If you don't respond, then it gets stronger each time.
Next up is Dr. Tom O'Brien, beloved functional medicine practitioner and the man behind the Betrayal series, which came out in 2016, which is right around when I got my diagnosis of rheumatoid arthritis. And I've got to say that series was another life changer for me. He really brought gut health to the world and is still talking about that. And that's what he's talking about in this little clip from our interview. Enjoy.
If I can begin, one of my mentors and friend is Professor Alessio Fasano, who is at Harvard. Yeah. And he's a professor of medicine, Harvard Medical School, a professor of nutrition, Harvard School of Public Health, the chief of pediatric gastroenterology at Mass General at Harvard, the director of the Mucosal Immunology Center at Harvard, meaning the lining of your lungs, the lining of your gut, the lining of your brain. He's the director of all of that. And the director of the Celiac Research Center at Harvard. 5 titles.
Wears a few hats.
Right, that any one title is a lifelong goal for people at the top of their field. And he's got 5. We think he's going to win the Nobel Prize. We truly do, because it was he and his team in 1997, almost 25 years ago, that identified the mechanism of this thing that we now call leaky gut. And they published hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of studies now in 25 years about how it works and how it affects your brain and how it affects your kidneys and how it affects your joints. And he's always so careful of what he says so that he's not misquoted. He's so careful. And he and his team published a paper last year. Listen to the title of the paper. All disease begins in the leaky gut.
Wow.
The role of zonulin, that's the protein that causes a leaky gut, the role of zonulin in the development of chronic inflammatory diseases. This is what they're teaching at Harvard Medical School right now.
That's good.
Exactly. All disease begins in the gut. Now, for anyone who's like, this is Harvard Medical School. And we learned this 2,500 years ago from the father of medicine called Hippocrates. He wrote, all disease begins in the gut.
Yes.
Now we've got Fasano and many others saying the same thing. So anyone that crosses their arms and says, yeah, whatever, well, we wish you well on your health journey, but it's not going good, unlikely to go the way you want it to go until you understand. Now, Professor Fasano talks about the 5 pillars in the development of chronic inflammatory disease.
This is very interesting. I'd like to share this. Yeah.
This is critical for everyone to know. Critical. You want to reverse the direction of your health? This is what you need to know. If you think taking a pill and getting rid of your symptoms fixes the problem, it's going to manifest somewhere else. Most likely, it's going to show up somewhere else. You have to identify, where is this coming from?
Next is an excerpt of my interview with Dr. Felice Gersh. She's a medical doctor with a vast knowledge of women's hormones, women's health in general. And in this segment, she's talking about the role of hormones and how they affect our gut health and so many other aspects of our health. Hope you enjoy this.
Now, in terms of like autoimmune disease, what happens is every immune cell in the body has estrogen receptors, but they're not the same on every immune cell. The innate immune cells, they're the ones that are the first responders. So that's a group of cells like that's called the mast cells, the macrophages, the neutrophils. They are like the first line of defense for invading pathogens like bacteria and viruses. And also if you have trauma like injured tissue, or if you have dead tissue, they are the ones that clean up the mess, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And then you have this other group of immune cells that are part of what we call the adaptive. They're the ones that make antibodies, and they interconnect and of course communicate with one another. And 70 or more percent of the immune system lines the gut. And what happens in menopause and also in other states, for example, if you alter your hormones, like with hormonal contraceptives, or if you have other conditions like polycystic ovary syndrome, or you have anorexia, things that will change how your ovaries are functioning, then what happens is you get an altered gut status where the microbes, what we call the microbiome, the collective of these trillions of microbial life forms in the gut, they transition into an abnormal state. And that changes the health of the gut itself, and the protective mucus lining that helps to keep everything working well and so on, it goes away. And then the toxins that are produced in the gut and these abnormal microbes get right up to the lining of the intestines, and they basically dissolve away the connective little fibers that hold the gut lining cells together. They start drifting apart, and we call that impaired gut barrier or leaky gut. And then when these different bacteria and viruses in the gut leak out into the body where the immune system surrounds the gut, then the immune system looks at it as like a chronic infection because these bacteria and viruses are continually entering the body. And then it activates the innate immune cells, and they create inflammatory cytokines, these inflammatory products. And then they communicate with the other immune cells that make antibodies. There's little clusters of them in this gut associated lymphoid tissue that are called Peyer's patches, and they start making antibodies. Now, turns out that we all life forms come from like a primordial pool of nucleotides, DNA, RNA. They're not like wildly different across every life form, including things like bacteria. So when we make antibodies against a specific bacteria or a virus, they cross-react. We call that molecular mimicry with our own cells. And they've actually linked, for example, with rheumatoid arthritis, certain types of gut microbes with the development of rheumatoid arthritis. And what happens is you make these antibodies against the invading, what looks like an invading, because it's coming from the gut, this bacteria, but it cross-reacts with our own tissues. And then it becomes perpetual, and you end up getting this autoimmune condition. And women have a very different immune system than men. We have more immune cells. We make substantially more antibodies. We have a more robust immune system designed to protect us. So a lot of the energy of a female body goes into this very unbelievably powerful immune system, whereas in males, they have a weaker immune system, and testosterone downregulates and acts as an immunosuppressant. And they put most of their body energy into maintaining a larger body with more muscle, more bone, and the perpetual production that takes a ton of energy of production of sperm. So we have a different we'll say apportionment of how we have energy spent in our bodies.
Now it's time for Debora Wayne, who is the founder of the International Chronic Pain Institute. She has a high-speed healing technique based on energy medicine, and in this excerpt, she's talking about how you can become empowered to use your mind and these other tools to help release chronic pain. Hope you enjoy this.
And most people are looking outside themselves for who's got the power. Where can I plug in? I'm not in charge of people. I can give them a leg up. But what ultimately my goal is to empower them with the tools that will change their thinking help them to understand that the power is within each and every individual. The answers are within you. I don't have anyone's answers, Jane. I draw the answers out of them and show them, see, you have your answers. Nobody just helped you go deep enough to find them, nurture them out of you, and help you learn to trust your GPS. You have an inner GPS, and we just need to activate that, turn it back on, and help you trust it. So I do that by working in 3 areas. One, the mind. The mind is the biggest culprit in the whole problem or solution.
Yes.
And so I help people discover a new way of observing their thinking rather than just believing every thought that they think. Most people are lost believing in every thought they think. And those thoughts came from someone else, somewhere else when they were very little. And they were literally like a computer with no virus protection, just downloading every file. And then decades later, their thinking is based on a faulty belief system and habits of thinking. So I help people find and release the damaging thoughts that are really starting the chain reaction, because thoughts always have an emotional reaction.
Yes.
The thoughts are like electricity, and then the emotions fuel it.
Yeah.
And emotions are the second area that we must explore. And this is the big, don't bring those emotions near me. This is the big category, because we live in a very intellectual society. They don't mind us talking about beliefs and thinking, but don't bring those emotions here. And so most people have learned very early to suppress, repress, deny, completely disassociate from their emotions, which are authentic and which are a major part of your GPS. And so I teach people how to, first of all, feel. And I say, in order to heal, you must learn to feel.
Love that.
And where they're stuffing those feelings away in their body, that creates patterns of stress and tension. And we all know that that stress is the root of all dis-ease. You cannot be healthy, happy, and have high energy if you're in dis-ease. Can't. So I help them find those emotions. Emotions are just energy. There's nothing to be afraid of. We know from science the average emotion lasts, are you ready for this? The average emotion lasts a whopping 90 seconds.
I think we can manage that.
We can manage that, right? But here's the thing. Most people are terrified of their emotions. And the number one reason that emotions get bigger, bolder, louder, and worse and don't leave is when we don't feel them. We don't allow ourselves to feel them. So the 90 seconds it can turn into 90 years because people are unwilling to feel them. So I help people learn not to be afraid of emotional energy and how to release it. It's easy. It's fast. It saves you decades of misery. And those 2 areas are key. They're tools you can learn, skills like any other skill. And once you have that, you will feel in your power, like you were saying, Jane. And then when you're empowered, you can navigate life instead of being a victim of life. Very different experience.
Dr. Keesha Ewers is next. She is an expert in functional medicine, Ayurvedic medicine, and she's an integrative medicine practitioner. She also has rheumatoid arthritis like me, and I really enjoy our conversations, how she blends all of these together. In this excerpt, she's talking about trauma as a root cause of autoimmune conditions. I think you're going to find it very enlightening.
We know from science that it takes anywhere from 10 to 30 years to develop a full-blown autoimmune disease. So people that are listening to us right now, like, you could be developing one and you don't know it, right? It takes a long time to get to the final diagnosis of an autoimmune disease. And so I just remember thinking, kind of laughing, like, oh, it's like I have a turkey timer in me, 20 years, ping, you're done, here you get out. And then going, okay, so that must be, I need to heal that part in order to heal this part. And that they're not separate, and that time's not linear the way we'd like to think about it, that it's all here encapsulated. And so that's what I did. I went and I did things like cut out sugar. I was a complete sugar addict. that's why I ran, was to keep my body weight where I wanted it to be. And then that got me a little bit better. And I cut out gluten, and back in those days, that wasn't such a thing. But now I do genetic testing on 100% of my patients. And it turns out years later, when I did genetic testing on myself, I'm so intolerant to gluten. And, so that got me another percentage better, but I still wasn't better. I was learning to meditate, practicing yoga. But when I healed that trauma, and a attachment disorder from birth that I had, those two things, right? Which is another kind of trauma. I had insecure attachment. I had insecure attachment at birth, which made insecure attachment to life. I find that a lot of my patients with autoimmunity have insecure attachment disorders. And so I help them heal those. It's actually not so hard. It's not hard, honestly, to heal this stuff. It just has to get identified. And so within 6 months, my RA was gone and it's never been back. So it's really powerful to take the model of medicine that we have, which tries very hard to separate mind from body, from spirit, from heart, which is stupid. How do you do that? And then collapse it into the oneness that we are, and start tracking where those arrested developmental wounds happened, which is all illness really is.
Next up is Dr. Anna Cabeca, a medical doctor and also known as the girlfriend doctor. In this excerpt, Dr. Cabeca is talking about alkalinity and how to eat in an alkaline way, because that is a way in which our body can heal. Enjoy.
At that same time, I was experiencing memory issues and focus issues, irritability, like the monster within me was coming out. Like, where did this person come from? And I was experiencing all of those things as well. And I was like, okay, so first things first, I went very strict keto, restricting my carbs, going keto. I've been very familiar with keto diet because I have my oldest child has seizures, and I used it in my patients with neurologic issues, as well as a modified version for my patients with candida. So I'm like, okay, all carbs are out, sticking really strict keto, but I didn't feel good. I felt like I hit a wall. And I did, what I asked my patients to do when I'm detoxing them as part of their nutritional hormone balancing protocol. I checked urine pH. So I checked urine pH using pH strips. These are my keto pH strips because I wanted to put everything on one strip so I don't have two strips in the bathroom everywhere. But urine pH, urine is, tells us so much. That's why your doctors check your urine. They're not just looking at infection. Two of the things that are on your doctor's urine dipsticks are typically pH and ketones. We pretty much ignore it, but let me tell you, this is really important. And I have found that more and more it's so important based on research, as well as helping guide you in your daily life and customizing a routine that works best for you, the individual plan that works for you. So I checked urine pH, and my urine pH was as acidic as the pH paper read. So it read, it didn't change color. It was like 5 or whatever, according to the paper, but it may have been less than that. So that was a huge aha moment for me, because when our urine pH is acidic for a long time, that, it is associated with increased inflammation and increased breakdown of your bone, muscle, etc. So that was an aha moment for me. No wonder I feel on edge. I feel irritable. I feel off balance, right? More moody. And so I started okay, well, I need to add alkalinizers in. So I started using a vegetable that I'd been throwing away for years, and that is beet greens. Instead of eating the beets, I would put the beets aside and saute the beet greens, and a beautiful recipe with lemon juice and olive oil and onions. Oh my gosh, makes it so delicious. Otherwise, they're pretty bitter. But they're very alkalinizing, rich in methylation factors and really great minerals. And so that started helping, making kale soup, eating the microgreens like broccoli sprouts, and adding alkalinizing herbs, increasing my Mighty Maca Plus supplement to 2, 3, 4 scoops a day, and adding in, like apple cider vinegar, drinking more water in between meals, not with meals, and focusing on these little tweaks that started to improve my urine pH. And then I noticed because I'm testing every time I went to the bathroom. I do this like recently, I'm going into a 3-day fast. So I'm testing to make sure I'm good and alkaline and boosting my alkaline urine pH. I'm not talking about blood pH. It's totally different. Yeah. But urine pH as a biomarker for our health and making sure I'm pretty alkaline going in. So, so what I noticed was, Jane, that those mornings I would get up and do my gratitude journaling before I hit the ground running, or I would walk on the beach. I was my urine pH, despite like the same breakfast, the same lunch, whatever, I was more alkaline all day.
My next guest is Dr. David Hanscom, a former orthopedic surgeon who had his own issues with chronic pain and poor health, which led him to really dig into the research. And he found the link between really a lot of chronic illnesses and anxiety. And that's what we're talking about in this excerpt.
The essence of all chronic disease is sustained stress physiology.
I believe that.
It's been documented in hundreds of papers. We've known this for decades. Mm-hmm. So I won't go into all the research on this, but again, it's not psychological. Your body's in fight or flight. It's like driving your car down the freeway in second gear. It's going to break down. So it turns out cancer, heart disease, Parkinson's, Alzheimer's are all inflammatory disorders.
Autoimmune disease, I'm assuming?
Autoimmune, irritable bowel. I had 17 different symptoms at the worst part of my deal, because what happens, your mental threats translate into stress physiology, which translates into physical and mental symptoms, by the way. So it turns out anxiety, depression, OCD, bipolar, schizophrenia are all inflammatory disorders. They are not psychological. They are all physiological states. Mm-hmm. So again, the psyche is the input or the thoughts. And it turns out with OCD, so the prognosis for OCD is very poor, by the way. So cousins to it are eating disorders, hair pulling, nail biting, body image disorders. All those are obsessive disorders. And when I say anxiety is the driving force, is that avoiding threat or avoiding danger is what keeps us alive. So we're trying to pull anxiety out of the diagnostic coding system. Say, look, it's the driving force that creates a lot of creates a lot of behaviors that are psychological diagnoses, but it's a driving force. It's not the diagnosis. So there's lots of addiction, and there's lots of diagnoses that come out of it. Mm-hmm. But the thing we call anxiety is actually simply stress physiology.
And what do you know from your experience, like, doesn't work when dealing with this? Because we tend to think of it, most people tend to think of this as a psychological thing. Right. And so the tools used most often are psychological tools. And so do they work or do they not work, or what does work?
Well, let me just remind the listeners again that your unconscious brain processes about 40 million bits of information per second. Your conscious brain processes 40. So it's a 1,000,000 to 1 ratio. So what doesn't work is talk therapy. It doesn't work. Understanding your past in detail doesn't work. So what we've learned is that anxiety is a gift. How long would we survive without anxiety? So it's powerful, it's protective. Again, a 1,000,000 to 1 ratio. So the key issue, you learn to separate from it. In other words, we get our identity wrapped up in the survival reaction. It feels bad. You feel ashamed. There's all sorts of thoughts come into your brain. Remember, the emotions are what you feel. So if you're in fight or flight physiology, you don't feel very good. And then, so remember, anxiety causes you to take action to survive. But if you're trapped, your body kicks in more of a stress response and you become angry. So anger and anxiety are the same thing. It's just a matter of degree. Right. So I call anxiety a activated stress response, and anger is a hyperactivated stress response. So it's your last ditch effort to escape. But again, we have all sorts of threats. We have poverty, authoritarianism, racism, financial conditions, homelessness. Those are really bad physical threats, which I do not want to dishonor that suffering. That is a terrible thing. So, but those are threats. And one of the risk factors, by the way, for chronic disease are these situations socially that are a problem because your body's under threat all the time.
It's socioeconomic as well.
So that's a massive problem. So on top of that, the number one threat still are your thoughts. So even though your consciousness is only a fraction of your unconscious brain, it still activates this unconscious response.
Mm-hmm.
So again, I had 17 different physical and mental symptoms. I had anxiety, depression, and OCD. I had migraine headaches. My ears were ringing. My stomach was a mess. I had neck pain, chest pain, back pain. My feet were burning. The skin rashes popped up all over my body. How's that psychological?
Next is Dr. Jill Carnahan. She's a medical doctor who faced her own health challenges that really began at a young age from growing up on a farm. But she was surrounded by a lot of chemicals. And so in this excerpt, we're talking about toxicity and things you can do to reduce the toxic load in your body and lower inflammation.
Let's talk really practical first, because
Okay.
practical is like toxicity, what you'd think it would be. I like to keep things simple because otherwise we forget what everything we heard. And one of the things I often say is where to start, because we are living in a toxic soup. We're literally swimming in chemicals. I just found out last year, and I started writing about this, PFAOs, which are like Teflon and Gore-Tex and these waterproof materials that are in clothing and furniture and even on our pans if we don't get clean, cookware. They're called forever chemicals. So it means if they're in our environment, the scientists don't even know the half-life. They can't even calculate it. So they're around forever, basically. All of the water supply in Colorado that was tested had contamination of PFAOs. I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, that's irreversible, right? So some of these things can be pretty discouraging. And then we have like when the wildfires happened in California and Colorado, where I live, the toxic smoke really affected people. And I could name 100 other examples. So toxic load. So I told you I keep it simple. So what I always tell people is clean air, clean water, clean food. Start really, really basic. And these things actually make a profound difference, because when we start to decrease the water level in our toxic bucket, it's like we're all born with a bucket ability to detox. And when that water level starts to increase over a lifetime, for me at 25, it spilled over the top with breast cancer. And I had been on a farm with toxic chemicals or endocrine disruptors that affected my breasts and my hormones. So that was probably in well water, maybe even in utero. But in general, clean air, about 80% of our toxic load comes from the air that we breathe. So it's pretty amazing, because we can do a lot by just getting a good air filter in our furnace, a high MERV rating, or something that will actually pull out the particulate. And you make sure you change that every 2 or 3 months. Really important and easy. We do it, we have that anyway. And then I have a lot of standalone filters. I'm a real big fan of the HEPA filter with a VOC filter. And there's some good brands out there that have both. And that's real key. I have 3 in my home and 5 in my work. I just have a lot of filters, but it really makes a difference, the air. And I can even tell you, during the worst of the pandemic, when we were, isolated to our office, we did not get sick because the types of filter we had in there actually filtered viruses. Now, I don't know if that was related, but I can't help but think it helped us all stay well during that time. So clean air, clean water. Sounds simple, but if you're drinking out of plastic water bottles, or you're not getting a purified source of water, you're drinking tap water. I mean, I travel all the time and I never ever drink tap water if I can avoid it. It's just one of those things that is probably contaminated. So if you can get reverse osmosis for your house, that's a great way to do it. That can be kind of pricey. That will also remove minerals. So if you do that, you're drinking a very acidic product. So you want to make sure you're either taking minerals or adding back minerals. Another option is like countertop filters or fridge filters or things like that. I have 2 of those, one on my counter, one in my fridge, and that's what I use. And those will not deplete the minerals as much as the reverse osmosis. So you have clean air, clean water, clean food. And food inputs there are so critical. We want to have organic whenever possible. If you can't afford all organic, you can go to Environmental Working Group. It's ewg.org, and every year they put out the top 12. They call it the dirty dozen, which means the ones that are most sprayed with pesticides. So at the very least, you can buy those things organic and then maybe save money on the rest. But that organic inputs, there's so much pesticide. There's things like glyphosate, which is Roundup, that are sprayed on our wheat and our corn, and most of our processed foods have lots of glyphosate in it. That really disrupts the gut microbiome and causes dysbiosis, some abnormal things in the gut, and issues with absorption of nutrients and many, many things. So at the very least, clean air, clean water, clean food, you can start there.
Next is Dr. Yoni Whitten. He is a chiropractor who specializes in helping people release chronic pain naturally. And this is such an interesting topic we talk about today. We're talking about what happens in your brain when pain becomes chronic. So have a listen, and I think your eyes are really going to be open about what may be going on with chronic pain in your mind.
On a base level, When pain is present, it's your body drawing your attention to something. It's like a neon sign in the night. It's like, hey, pay attention to this, do something about this. Let's work on this. It's intelligently put there to help ensure your survival. At the base level, that's what pain is. In order for that to happen, what takes place neurologically is these signals are coming in, and those signals are something called nociception or nociception. And what it is it's noxious stimuli. It's not actually pain, because in order for something to become pain, it has to hit a threshold level of nociception and then be transferred up to the conscious level of the brain, where it is interpreted as pain. So what happens when pain becomes chronic is the body is trying to call your attention to something and you're not responding. You're not making the change that your body's asking for. You're not understanding what your body's telling you, and you're continuing to do the thing or be exposed to the thing that your body is trying to alert you to with these neurological signals. So think of it like this. I am standing next to you as you go through your day, and you get into a situation that is potentially damaging. I'm going to tap you on the shoulder from behind, and I'm going to kind of whisper in your ear and say, hey, Jane, you're going to want to pay attention to this. You don't pay attention to me. You ignore me.
Right.
And I'm going to start tapping you a little bit harder with my palm this time, and I'm going to say, hey, Jane, I need you to pay attention to this. No response. And I'm going to say, hey, Jane, I need you to pay attention to this. And still no response. Now I'm going to start screaming. That's what chronic pain is. And what takes place neurologically is nothing short of absolutely fascinating, remarkable. So what takes place neurologically is a process called neuroplasticity, which we talk about all the time in the online space and functional medicine, but we're usually talking about it in terms of habit formation or breaking old habits, creating new habits. So think of it like this. Your body is trying like heck to get you to hear this super important message. You're not getting it. So what it's going to do is it's going to send more signals. Then it's going to hit that threshold that we talked about, and it's going to be consciously interpreted as pain. You still don't listen. What's your body going to do? It's going to send even more signals. What's your body going to do? It's going to grow your nerves actually thicker so that it can transmit more signals. Then you know what it's going to do? It's going to increase the amount of synapses, the connections from the nerves that are receiving the signal up to the brain so that it can start sending even more pain signals. It's like a freeway that's plugged up with car traffic. It's like, oh, I better find an alternative route. And so it does these things. It will physically change the structure of your neurological system to get more pain signals to try and get you to understand what it's telling you. And then you know what it'll do? It'll actually decrease threshold. So you weren't
still
getting
trying to
it.
get your attention.
Yes, and that's chronic pain. Now you have a situation like you alluded to where the physical damage may have been long repaired, but now you have these structural changes in your neurological system that have never been dealt with. So now think of it as chronic pain is a habit of being in pain.
And now for the last interview for this 100th episode of Wellness by Design. It is with Dr. Eleanor Stein, who is actually a psychiatrist, but she had her own story with chronic pain, which led her to seek out alternative solutions, just like so many of us. In this interview, we're talking about how the brain gets involved, the neuroplasticity of pain, and she's giving you an exercise you can do to begin lowering chronic pain today. Ellie, you're giving people so much hope because, I mean, you know, if people are in chronic pain, they really just want to do anything to get out of it. Yet they've been told, you know, you'll learn to live with it, or there's nothing you can do. And so they've got these beliefs, and those beliefs are part of making that neural network that keeps the pain going, right?
Exactly.
So what you're saying is that they can change that. They can They can literally change and create new pathways in their brain so that that pain message doesn't keep getting through. I mean, I think that's pretty amazing. So, can you give us an example of how someone would use neuroplasticity to get out of chronic pain?
So I'll just say there's many strategies, and I've developed an online course to teach you, again, a smorgasbord of strategies, because not every strategy is going to be comfortable or is going to work for every individual. But here's my kind of the core strategy. I call it active redirection. So when we have pain, it's not our fault. It's just what happens. We kind of get into habits, right? We have a habit of how we respond every time we become aware of pain. And usually it's some combination of a bit of withdrawal, like, oh, I can't stand this. I just want to rest. I want to put heat on it. I want to cancel my plans. And probably there's some negative thinking like hopelessness and frustration and anger and just disillusion with life. Like, why is this happening to me? I could be doing so many things with my life. So this combination of thoughts and feelings and actions, people fall into their own personal habit. It's just normal, right? It's not that you're doing anything wrong. I just want to emphasize that because with these chronic conditions, people sometimes tend to blame themselves. Totally pointless. When you blame yourself, what actually happens is the brain senses more danger because it's like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to handle this. Yeah. So please don't blame yourself. Please be compassionate. But think about what could you do differently? So active redirection means changing the focus of your attention from the pain and the misery associated with the pain, and maybe other symptoms like fatigue and brain fog and things that go with the pain, to something that's incompatible with pain. So something that makes you feel happy, connected, meaningful or purposeful, an elevated mood, creative. So all of those emotions that are the opposite of pain. It turns out neurons, so each individual neuron is connected to thousands, maybe tens of thousands of neural pathways. But any neuron can only do one thing at a time. So when a neuron fires, it goes into a latency period where it can't fire again for a little while. The charge has to build up again. So the strategy is to keep your neurons busy, doing the things that are going to make you feel good and that are part of your solution. And then they literally can't process pain because they're busy. They've got, like, I think of the Charlie Brown cartoon, and Lucy was always my favorite character because she's the psychiatrist. Yeah. And she has the little sign up, like out to lunch or something, like busy, come back later. It's kind of like that with the neurons. Every time you become aware of pain, keep your neurons busy doing something that you want, and they just literally won't be able to process the things that you don't want.
That's all, folks. Thank you so much for joining me for this 100th episode of the Wellness by Design podcast. I hope you've enjoyed these 10 interviews I've selected for you from the past 99 episodes. There are so many good episodes. Please go back and listen or watch any of them. And please leave a review or a comment and a rating. I would appreciate it so much. This project and everything that I do really comes from my heart. It's really a gift from my heart to yours. It's a part of my mission, part of my calling. I feel like all of this happened to me, and it's because I meant to share this message of empowering people in their health. So I hope you feel empowered after listening or watching these interviews, and take it with you. Take it with you into your day. And the one thing I would say that you could do today to become empowered in your health and initiate healing in your body is to take responsibility. Take responsibility 100% for your health. You can do this, my friend. You've got support, you've got information, and you've got inspiration.